Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Journey with Dan podcast, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a bilingual neurolinguistic programming and cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issues, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling using the EFT method, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one sessions in both French or English and also do group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMB therapy and coaching services at 301-325-1550, and our website can be found at lifecoach.drdanamzallag.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our 7th episode of season 13, a special guest, author, and confident expert, Mike Acker. And just like every of my past episode, I will leave it up to the guests to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Mike, the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Dan. Yeah, Mike Acker here. I am an author of 8 books, something like 7 workbooks, and then some other stuff as well. So almost 20, traditionally published, hybrid published, self-published. And my first book is the top-rated book in the world on the topic of overcoming fear speaking. So I am an author. I'm an executive coach. I'll fly out and meet with different clients around the United States and even elsewhere sometimes to work with them, and a keynote and TEDx speaker. All of this, my whole goal is helping people realize their potential. And I'm super excited to be here with you, Dan. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for being here today. So this is one of the major questions that most people who are in an executive position that they need to speak to their staff, they have what we call the imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. So if you could just clarify that to our listeners, and also what stems from the imposter syndrome, especially if they have reached a high level in the hierarchy of the company, but yet still feel that, who am I cheating or who am I trying to fool here? So if you could clarify that.
Yeah, the imposter syndrome is this idea that everyone else belongs, but you don't. You're in the same room with them, but you're not really part of them. So if you think like a spy movie, a spy goes in and everybody else belongs, and the spy is pretending he's an imposter. He's not really part of that group that he's infiltrating, but he is pretending to be so. And yet that spy still does it with extreme confidence. In our case, the imposters don't feel like they are belonging. People buy into them. They've been given a seat at the table. They've been hired for that role. They've been elevated to a position. They have started that new professional career. They're in that room, but they feel like they don't belong. Now, here is the core area, and I talk about this in the book that's coming out in December. I talk about this, that the core issue of being an imposter is an issue of value. That here we are, we're in a room with about 10 other people, and we don't feel like we're quite as valuable as they are in this organization. Or we just got promoted to an executive role, and we don't feel like the value is there. Now, there are 2 ways to quickly get rid of this: arrogance and apathy. Now, those are not great ways to build confidence, but they do build confidence. So I want you to think about being in that room with 10 other people, 20 other people. You get elevated, and there's that one person who they think their value is super high. And as a result of it, they lack no confidence. They don't feel like an imposter. In fact, they might be one of the reasons why you feel like an imposter. And then there's other people who just don't care. I don't care what people think about me, for good or bad. I don't care if I get the job or don't get the job. I just don't care. So there are some apathetic and arrogant people out there, but most people come into a role, and especially when they're newer into it, they feel like others have value than they don't. They feel like the executive team has the value. They feel like their established colleagues have the value. They feel like that person has a value. And me, well, I'm just whatever it is. So if you've ever heard yourself say, I'm just, then you likely have suffered some degree of imposter syndrome.
Beautiful. Now here, I'm sure that you've heard this say before, Mike. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room, right?
Yeah.
So, but here, how I can feel that it contradicts the imposter syndrome. And let me tell you why, and maybe you may agree or disagree. So if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So that means that you want to learn from other people that
Mhm.
are smarter so you could actually absorb that information. But then that does not feed the fact that you are less valuable because you're not the smartest person in the room, because people will come to see you speak. They come to be able to get some information from you, some inspiration words or whatever it is, and to be able to learn on how to become more confident doing public speaking. So theoretically or technically, you are the smartest person in the room because people come to pay to see you or hear you speak. But if
Right.
you go into a room where you are not, you're the smartest person there, then you are in that wrong room. So how does that feed from each other?
Yeah, it's very interesting because I go into places all the time where, in terms of the industry, I have no idea about the marketing industry in the specific way, or I've been in some automotive industry trade sessions or the food selling, and I don't know. So there's an area that I am completely not belonging in that sense. And others come to me, and that might be the same way. Here's what we need to realize is that our value does not have to be the same value as others. We're brought to the table not because we know it all, but maybe because we know a lot in our area. I think about even in the medical profession. You don't have one doctor who knows every single thing. You have a whole bunch of specialists.
Yes.
And yet they know their value in that area, cardiology or maybe an x-ray tech or the nurse. And you have different parts of the medical profession working together for the best part. Same with sports. You don't have every single person be a perfect goalie. You want a great goalie who knows a lot in the area, knows their value in that area. Now, if you were to put that person as a striker, well, they'd probably do okay, but not great. And so what you want to know, even there's a lot of ways to overcome the imposter syndrome, but focusing on this, know what you know well and know your value in that area in and of itself, not in comparison to others. Okay. You even hinted at something right there, like there's that almost that comparison to others. And the moment you find yourself comparing yourself with others and competing with others, when you compare and compete, you'll always live in defeat. And so you want to move away from that kind of negative, am I valuable in comparison to them, and really know your area, get better in your area, and then you will realize your value and feel like you belong. If I'm in a room with a whole bunch of other communication experts, and maybe they're much more established in this, they've been doing this and this and this, I'm going to know that maybe that person knows body language more than I do. And that person knows negotiation more than I. But even in that realm of communication, which seems like it's a small bucket, there's lots of different areas. And so I'll go in and go, okay, well, let's talk about overcoming nervousness. Now that's going to be an area where I specialize in, versus I'm okay in some of these other areas. I can play them, I can do well, but next to that PhD expert professor from whatever university, yeah, I might not be the expert as that person, and I shouldn't try to compare myself to them.
True. So let's jump into that DeLorean time machine for a minute here, going to the past. And what brought you to become the person that you are today? I'm sure that the confidence part must have been a struggle for you as well, Mike, as you were younger, that brought you to become, like an expert in that field, as we all become an expert in the field for something that we lacked before. So what really pushed you to say, you know what, that's something that I'd like to go in?
Yeah. So thankfully, I have two parents who had a lot of confidence. And yet when I was brought into the world, I had a speech impediment early on. And so I cannot often be understood. And so I'd go to say the j sound or shoulder or soldier, and I couldn't, that j sound, I couldn't make that sound. And so this began a lot of, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? What did he say? Even at the point in time where you should be understood, and people making fun of me and that kind of stuff. Also, I tended to be the type of kid, and still to the day I have to be careful, where I can start saying before I think of talking, before I really think about what I'm going to talk about. So here I am putting myself out there and then not knowing the repercussions, and then getting embarrassed on a regular basis, and putting myself out there with a speech impediment, being made fun of, and then come back. So I was aware of where I so-called fit into the classroom setting. and worked on that. Now, I worked a lot with a speech therapist early on to overcome that speech impediment. My mom would take me, and according to my mom, I worked it religiously. So I got to a spot where I could speak confidently and I could get up in front of people. And then right when I did that at like 7, 8, 9, we moved down to Mexico and I started brand new, different country, learning how to speak and present. And they'd say, Mike, come up on the stage and talk to everybody. And so I would start out with extremely bad Spanish, something like, hola, me llamar, Mike, como se dice, and then I would swear because everybody would teach me swear words thinking that that would be funny.
Yes.
And then everybody would laugh. And so I'm getting embarrassed. I'm putting myself out there, and I would actually create psychosomatic fever so I wouldn't have to go to school. Literally, like I would be sick every single week, and my mom would check my temperature, and she said, "Oh my gosh, you got another fever. Why are you getting sick?" It's because extreme nervousness, anxiety, and insecurity of going up in front of my classroom. So much so that I changed my identity from the serious student who loved to study to being the class clown. Wasn't the class clown, wasn't my personality, but I became the class clown because, man, if everybody keeps calling you something, you're probably it.
I'm believing it, yeah.
And so I believed it and became that personality. Eventually, working through it, going through it, I got to a spot where I could confidently speak in Spanish and be up on stage and be okay with the people still making fun of me even 7 years into it. And I moved back to the United States. And here I am again, finding my place in a world. So when I often talk with people like, Mike, why you? And it's because this is not like an academic exercise for me. Sure, I study this, have degrees, have the experience, spoken to 10,000 people, written the books, but this is not an academic, theoretical approach to it. This isn't something that I was so-called naturally born with. This is something I've fought for. And as someone who has fought for it to overcome it, I'm able to work with people right here and say, hey, wherever you are in your confidence, you can get through.
So if, let's say because most of your books were written based on public speaking, etc. But if it's someone just that doesn't have a position of authority, doesn't need to do public speaking, but just interact one-on-one with people, especially if they have like a speech impediment or they stutter, or whatever it is, that's something that it's not like a weight loss, which you could just go to the gym, eat better, and you lose it. A stutter will be there unless if you treat it with speech therapy. But how can you just, to the general population, to all of our listeners out there, how can you give confidence to someone to want to be able to be self-aware of their weaknesses and take action to be able to start making a change in their life and build and then kind of basically create not a vicious cycle, but more of a cycle to feeling more confident because now they could speak better and so on and so forth. So how do you break that ice, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so glad you asked this, because even though the book is called Speak with Confidence, the first part of the book, because I break it down into my framework of how to do that, the first part has very little to do with speaking. And the whole framework is just that often what we do, even when we want to become a public speaker with confidence, we try to focus on the external things like skills, or the mental things like, what are you saying? But even before you get there, there's a first component, and it's who you are. So the very first part of this book, which I believe is what really sets it apart from anything else, is who are you? And really coming to terms and deciding who you are. And I say this again and again when I'm working with clients, is that if you don't label yourself, you will wonder what labels others people put on you.
That's true.
So you want to decide, this is the type of person I am. This is who I am. I love that line in Atomic Habits where he says, habits are part of what you create to say, I'm the type of person who does this. Mm-hmm. And you want to decide who you are. Now, it needs to be grounded in reality. So I'm the type of person who's the best martial artist ever. No, I'm not. I don't know no martial arts at all. So I'm not. So it's not grounded in reality. You see that a whole bunch on America's Got Talent stuff. But what can you do to build confidence no matter where you are, whether it's on stage or off stage or with friends going in? Let me give you a couple just thoughts for you here. One, really study yourself. I would think about anything like Dr. Dan. Why is he a doctor? because he's got the degrees, he's got the study, he's put in the time. So why can you be confident in what you do? Why can I be confident in my speaking? Why can a mechanic be confident in working on a car? Why? Because they put in the time to study. And one of the best ways that you can get confident in yourself is study yourself. Really, really study yourself. Now, why can't a mechanic work on a car that maybe he hasn't worked on exactly that car before? It's because he knows the principles. He can transfer it. Now, it might not be what he's really used to, or maybe he'd prefer not to work on that model, but it's what he has. And you look at what you have and you study yourself and you come to an agreement with 3 words. Do I appreciate this about myself? Do I accept this about myself? Or do I need to improve this? And those 3 words are so, so powerful in terms of really finding confidence in who you are.
Okay, so that's actually a very interesting point. But here where comes the caveat in this whole theoretical approach to the confidence and the believing in yourself. So if, let's say, someone practiced law for 10 years, okay, and in the beginning they had passion for it, they lost completely the passion, and they feel that they no longer have enough confidence to be able to continue on in that field or in that sector of the industry. So people who no longer love their job, which is 87% of the US population, how, if you lose passion, you lose interest. If you lose interest, you no longer want to be able to grow in that field, means learning more. More you learn, more you become an expert, as you mentioned, by putting the studies, by putting the time, etc. But when the passion disappears, does the confidence disappear as well?
I think whatever we're doing in terms of passion, we have to come back to the purpose for it. And here's one of my big mantras on overcoming nervousness is it's not about you. It's not about you. So even as I'm speaking right now, no one tuned in going, you know what, I'm gonna show up on the podcast today just to support Mike Acker and make him feel better about himself. No one's tuning in to watch it going like that. Now, not that people here don't want me to feel good about myself, or they're nice people. You're listening to this, you want the best for me. Sure, you got it, because you're a nice person. But you tune into the podcast because you want something for you. So if I come in here and I have talked about what I'm talking about with you so many times, I've written a book about it. I have coached this for years. I've done workshops on this. I'm preparing for a TEDx for this. So this is something I know extremely well and have said many times. And if it's about me, then I'm done with it. I said it, let me move on to something new. But if it's about others, and if I can connect it to others, then I can still be passionate, because even though the content doesn't necessarily change, the people do. And think about going back to the medical profession, as I'm looking at your name, doctor, right? And a doctor can treat the same thing again and again and again, and really becomes an expert and almost bored with the issue of maybe cardiology, but not bored with the person who comes in front of him and says, I need help. This is what's going on. And so if you can connect what you do with the people that it serves, then you can hold on to the passion. And if you can't, and I get it, sometimes there is compassion fatigue. And so if you can't, then it's time to say, okay, let's let a different generation raise up in this area and on to something new.
Very interesting. So do you think that most of what we need to focus on when it comes to public speaking and all, or even interacting with one-on-one, is the building the rapport with that other person? And then this is how you could actually feel more comfortable, because like when you're on stage on TEDx, okay, for example, and there's like 5,000 people like looking at you, okay, is there a way, or is there a technique that you use to feel like this is not a crowd of 5,000 people, it's like one person with 5,000 people in it? So it's like so is there a way or a strategy that you use that will make them feel like, okay, I'm not in front of so many people, I'm going to stare at one and I'm going to focus at that one? So is there something that you could help our listeners to be able to kind of ease that stress right before they go on stage?
Right. Yeah. So once again, confidence comes into 3 different parts. There's the skills, what you do, there's a message, what you say, and then there's identity, who you are. which is really the framework of all of my coaching, whether for executive presence or public speaking. And so in that mind space of identity, we get into, and in the preparation for the message, we get into the same thing. Who am I and who am I helping? Who am I and who am I helping? So once you know who you are, then you start thinking about who are they and how are you helping them? And then speak to them, not speak for yourself, speak to them. On the identity piece, not worrying about you because people aren't really worried about you. They're worried about themselves. Now a messaging piece, really speaking to them. So going back to the imposter syndrome, the first time I heard that was several years ago. I was working with this client and she had risen up through the ranks to be part of one of 40 people. She was only female. Everybody else was Ivy Leaguers. And she was speaking to this group. And she was just nervous, imposter syndrome. I had to look it up. I was like, what is imposter syndrome? And she told me about it. I was like, oh, I get it. And she said, I just don't even like the group. They're all jerks. They're all this. They're just awful people, on and on. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's tough. And often what happens when we get up in front of 5,000 people or 40 people that we don't like is we generalize them and we turn people into a crowd. And crowds are scary. Think about anything scary that has happened. It's been done in the name of a crowd mindset, and people jump into it, and it can be awful. But you take that crowd, even think about the political party that's on the other side of where you stand. You have turned them into a crowd. They're all Republicans. They're all Democrats, and you turn them into a different crowd. But I bet you anything that you could find some people that even ideologically disagree with you that you'd still really like. And how does that happen? Well, you take them away from a crowd and you turn them into a person, an individual. Likewise, for standing in front of people or working with people or doing whatever it is, if you can break down the mass generalization into people, then you can get to know people and speak to people. Crowds can be scary, but people, they can be friends. So there you are going into this room like this lady was. And first of all, we talked about imposter syndrome. Like, what's your value? Okay, sure, you don't have one of the aspects of value they have. You don't have an Ivy League education, but let's talk about your value. In some ways, it's very impressive. In some ways, although we don't want to compare, it can be more impressive than them. So let's be rooted in your value. And the second is, when you go in there, out of the 40 jerks, is there anyone you know and anyone you like? And we ended up finding one person. I said, well, tell me about that person. Well, this and this. I said, well, tell me more. I kind of got her lost in thinking about his life, and he had just had a kid and there's all this stuff going on. And what do you think he's going through? What do you think he needs? What do you think he's hopeful for? What do you think his aspirations are? And in the end, she was able to go into that room of 40 and really treat all of them like they were that one. Does she have nerves still? Sure. One technique is not going to erase all the nerves, but she was better equipped to go in that room instead of saying, here, I'm talking to 40 people that I don't like, that don't like me. I'm talking to Tony, let's say, and some people like Tony. So if you're going into that environment, or you're wherever you are in that role where you're nervous around people, if you can break it down, you can feel a lot more confident. I've had this happen to me, Dan. I've gone into some spaces and initially their acumen is like, oh my gosh, they're at this level. They have that going on. They have that going on. They're amazing. But if we've learned anything from People Magazine and Us Magazine, it's that just because you look like you're at the top doesn't necessarily mean that you're a perfect human, and that you have a lot of difficulties. And if you can get underneath the so-called expressions of success, you can find a person.
Very interesting, Mike. Actually, in one of my previous podcasts that happened, I think, a few months ago, I was talking with a psychiatrist, and we dealt about the concept of low self-esteem, what it really means, which has a lot of similarity with, of course, lack of confidence or overconfidence. But when we talk about low self-esteem, the word low self-esteem doesn't have really a true meaning behind it. It's the esteem that we allow others to give on us. So basically, and when you go and speak to a crowd, whatever it is, everyone fear of being judged. So if you fear of being judged, the only person that can judge you beside yourself is the people that you talk to. Oh, who is that person to be on the stage? Stage, I mean, like, I'm not sure on the TEDx, I have not done one yet, but I'm not sure if the stage is elevated. So that shows that someone is on a pedestal and everyone else is below. So already the concept, the psychological concept of someone being on stage elevates them already. And I'm not sure if it's just because of the visual of how people perceive the crowd and how the crowd perceive the person on stage. But then again, that has a whole psychological explanation. But again, is that the more of the fear of being judged that intersect with low or high confidence?
I mean, there's as many different answers and variations of the answers as there are people who come in. But one of the main reasons that we get to this spot where we get just so anxious in this is that we haven't fully built out our structure and our strength and our muscles. And now we have a whole bunch of pressure on us and we're unable to stand up under that pressure.
Okay.
And this is why studying who you are and really coming up with like, this is who I am. And actualize, not like an aspirational desire. It can have parts of aspiration too, but you want it to be actualized. This is who I am. So I'm the type of person who does this. And then when you get up on there, there's still going to be some pressure. And one of the great ways to then act in that moment is take the pressure, take the nerves, and do kind of like a judo move where you push that nervousness back into energy. Because when you get up on stage, you should be a little bit bigger. So like right now, we were chatting just a little bit beforehand, and I wasn't maybe as articulate, maybe as like jumping in and kind of excitement and moving with my body. But when the camera comes on, you have to increase that energy a little bit. Same with on stage or leading a team meeting. Same person, but take any nerves, take any expectations, flip it around, turn it into energy, turn it into excitement for doing what you need to do. I mean, that's what you do in sports. You take the jitters and you turn it into energy.
That's so true. Now, if any of our listeners out there who are CEOs of different companies and all, and they want to be able to seek your services, to be able to give them either coaching them or anything, how can they find you, where they can find you, and if you have any like social media handles that represent your service, if you could share that with us or with our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have several different places, but if you go to mikeacker.com, that's mikeacker.com. That's also my social media handle. So mikeacker.dot.com. And that's where you can find me all over the place, and would love to connect. And I have training programs. I'll come in and work with teams as well. I have individual coaching sessions as well. And I have lots of books, and the newest one, Speak with Confidence, out by Wiley, I really believe is going to be a game breaker for many people.
And you do mostly like virtual, or you now meet people face to face since the pandemic has alleviated the restrictions?
Yeah, both. So next week or in 2 weeks, I'll be in Des Moines, and I was just recently in Scottsdale and San Diego. So for a lot of my clients, they want to do something that really is a longer aspect. And so I'll fly out, we'll meet with them for a day, and then we'll do a lot of virtual training too. But I do have a virtual studio, so I'll do trainings and stuff right here out of my virtual studio, as well as a lot of coaching right here.
Beautiful. Well, Mike, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. And thank you again for participating and inspiring our many listeners with your incredible story. Now, we hope that you've all enjoyed today's episode. And I'm also very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for season 13 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories, just like the one that you listened to today. Now, here are some concluding words of wisdom. Believe in yourself. Have faith in your abilities. Without a humble but reasonable confidence in your own powers, you could not be successful or happy. Confidence is that feeling by which the mind embarks in great and honorable courses with a sure hope and trust in itself. Just like trust, it can take years to build and 1 second to destroy. By hanging around the wrong and toxic people, their miserable life can transfer into yours, just like a communicable virus, and start attacking your mind and belief about yourself. You must, at all costs, detach yourself from people who can do harm to yourself, confidence, and just so they can feel better about themselves. Do not apologize for your success so they can feel human again. You don't need to flaunt your success, as humbleness is crucial, but you shouldn't feel sorry for the sacrifice you have made to become the successful person you are here today. Keep walking with your head held high and appreciate the good and abundance you are experiencing in your life. My name is Dr. Dan Amzallag, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.